Good morning, Greg. How are we doing up there in the mountains of Gunnison, Colorado today?
Another dump of snow overnight. So I
Oh
was
man,
feverishly plowing before our
it.
day of Zooms and team calls happening. And the dog doesn't like to plow, Brian. The dog does not
Oh
like to
no.
plow.
Well, we've had a lot of rain again, but out here in
Oh
Southern
yeah.
California, we need it. I haven't seen this much before since I've been out here, so that's I guess a good thing in the long run. The problem is it's all coming at once. But today we are going to be talking about misinformation, disinformation, and just
Yeah.
information processing in general. And obviously we're taking it from our perspective, but that's kind of a lot of what we do. I mean, technically we've been on a line item for different government projects as information scientists, right? So that's been our title in a sense. So we know a little bit about it, but
Yep.
yeah, I want to clearly sort of define some of the terms up front and what this is, because it's nothing new. These are terms that people are constantly throwing around now, and it always makes me roll my eyes. But the misinformation, disinformation has to do with information that isn't necessarily factually true. But
Right.
the idea is misinformation is just kind of false or inaccurate information. But then disinformation would be the false or accurate information that someone's kind of using for a purpose, right? I mean,
Yep.
there's some sort of intent,
Intentional.
but
Yeah.
there's
Yeah. Yeah.
intentional
Yeah.
behind it, right? It's
I
not just
agree.
it's not just I heard a rumor and now I'm sharing a rumor. It's I'm doing this for a purpose. It's intent. So that's kind of the difference between misinformation and disinformation. And I always think of the D. I'm horrible at remembering. When you get two terms that are real close to each other, I'll constantly interview, and you do the same thing,
Of
right?
course, I do it
But
because you're in the moment and you're
yeah, but
thinking three or four steps ahead, like
but
a
I always
chess
think of
match, right? But
the
it's not
D
intentional.
the
It's not
D
deliberate, right?
the D in
Yeah.
disinformation means deliberate to me. Like, that's how I remember that. So
That's a smart way.
yeah, so if we screw that up going forward, just remember that, folks. But the idea is this has been around forever. This is how humans are. This is how humans communicate. So if you're listening right now, think of it. Anytime you've embellished a story or passed along a story from someone that you never checked or didn't know, and I'm not talking like sharing a link on social media. I mean literally telling and sharing your story. Oh, did you hear about so and so? Okay, that shit's all junk. But 90% of what comes out of humans' mouth is junk. It's talk. It's an immediate response. It's this. And historically, this stuff's always been around. One of my favorite books I love talking about social media about is that guy Tom Standage wrote that one about I think it was called Social Media or The Writing on the Wall, the first 2,000 years of social media.
Yes.
It even talks about, like, ancient Romans, like they'd post something on the reading wall where people have to go see what it was. Here's what happened. But what was more popular was, I want to hear Greg's take on that. So Greg would write his letter or his response, and I would read it at my party with my friends, and we'd go back and forth because I want to hear what you have to say. So people didn't back then didn't care what was coming out of the direct. Hey, here's what happened. Here's the law. It's written down. No, I want to hear what someone's take is. So
Isn't
none
that
of
familiar? That is
Yeah,
a
I know,
familiar
that's what I
ring to
mean.
it,
Like,
Brian.
so
Yeah.
so none of this stuff is new, and
Right.
all of us engage in it either intentionally or unintentionally. Like I said,
Right.
every time it's like the telephone game, right? If you remember a kid,
Exactly right.
when it
Yeah.
that's what happens. Or so it's not something to be like, this isn't new. There's nothing new about any of this stuff and how information works. And if you really dig into information theory, you can get down to the physics of information,
Yep.
and understand how a lot of this stuff is so entirely predictable. But it comes along with initial reports of something come out, and then that always changes later. Then people go, well, why did this change? It's like, well, because the initial report about anything is never, almost never right, and it's
Almost
usually
never.
so far off from being what it is. But we need, as humans, that instant gratification. But the reason also we're talking about it is because we sort of had I you sort of summed up a lot of this in an experience, an event, a thing we were at the other week in
Yep.
Pennsylvania. We were talking to some really important folks, and I thought you did a great job of it because you tied in a couple of things that we know and other people might know about certain historical events, certain stories, whatever it is, and tied it in to show as an example. So I was kind of hoping you would be able to share that in a sense with the listeners of what you said and briefed all of these very important folks out there, and they got to hear. And I know it's not going to be the same, right? But it was, so some of it was sort of in the moment, and it was spurred by a conversation we had at dinner over this,
Yep.
and then it turned
But
into
some of our
something
best
bigger.
conversations are, Brian.
It is, and that's what these are on the podcast too. We try to
Yeah.
have, it's hard to replicate that there in the moment over dinner, but we try to do that on here. But So I'll throw it to you, Greg, on that to sort of share with everyone your take on this.
Exactly. And the Brian and I were eating at Lamb's Creek Food and Spirits in Mansfield, Pennsylvania. If you're ever in Pennsylvania and you're in Mansfield, it's the place to go.
It's
because
delicious.
you got that and you've got a Perkins, right?
Yeah.
And the Perkins, wonderful. Shout out to Carol and her staff there. But for a dinner, I'm telling you, Lamb's Creek was the place. So as we're sitting there enjoying a cocktail, talking to some very intelligent people, the 1965 classic Rescue Me comes on over the piped in music. And one of the guys we're sitting at the table with, who is a genius, a Wile E. Coyote super genius and a PhD, says, the amazing Aretha Franklin. And I did a spit take, if you remember, Brian, and I was like, whoa, wait a minute. I'm a music history student and I'm a Detroit boy, and it's not Aretha, it's the amazing Fontella Bass. Matter of fact, Aretha never covered that song. Yep. It was always Fontella Bass, and that led me down a path.
Are you going to sing a bar real quick to get everyone in the
I won't, but I will sing in a minute, Brian, because you've demanded it with my gravelly voice. That'll be great. But Fontella Bass, for everybody that remembers her, she was a one-hit wonder of sorts, and that was the song that defined her career. Shout out to St. Louis, where we were just a few weeks ago. Shout out to the great Joe Wade, fantastic team at Asymmetric Solutions, our dear friend Joe Busso. Everything St. Louis is epitomized in Fontella Bass. So the first thing that comes to my mind, my drug-addled mind, is ethylene. And so I'm thinking of ethylene. So if we combine glycol, then we have ethylene glycol, colorless, odorless, and I use it in my radiator to cool my engine. But I can also use it to murder my significant other. And that's why the radiator coolant manufacturers always tell you to wash down your driveway if you have a stain, so your dog doesn't lick it and die, right? So ethylene glycol, we ran into a lot in Iraq and Afghanistan, Brian, because it's a component in some bombs that people make that are explosive nature, but homemade. So HME, that's a hard term sometime to come up with when you're on a roll. And so ethylene on its own is pretty significant, and I'll get into that in a moment. So ethylene made me think of Bob Seger, and Bob Seger took me back to my brother's high school graduation, my dear brother Brian in Grosse Pointe now, but in East Detroit in 1976, Seger sang at his high school graduation. He wasn't quite as big as he is now, right? And now you could probably get him, but what's the guy you make fun of all the time?
God,
I drink alone.
George Thorogood.
Yeah, Thorogood. You could probably hire Thorogood to fill a room. But Seger sang at my brother's high school graduation. I snuck in. And among other songs, you know that Seger's famous for singing old-time rock and roll. He recorded Just Give Me Old Time Rock and Roll, 1979. Everybody knows that they associate it probably with a film or a song, which is why, Brian, that we're going to get back to in a minute, why these things happen, how misinformation, disinformation start. The song Old Time Rock and Roll was written by the famous George Jackson. George Jackson, born in Mississippi, 1945, wrote 14 hit songs by the time he was 30 years old. I remember George from Muscle Shoals, Alabama, the place that he put on the map for a lot of people that like the type of music I do. And George Jackson, no relationship to anybody but George Jackson, wrote the song One Bad Apple. And everybody on the call knows the one bad apple don't spoil the whole bunch, girl. Give it one more try before you give up on love. One bad apple don't spoil the whole bunch, girl. I don't care what they say. I don't care what you heard. You remember that. Now, I would really get into that if I didn't want to wake the dog that's sleeping next to me. But we instantly and immediately relate that song with the Jackson 5. Well, there's two things wrong with that file folder, Brian. First of all, Jackson 5 never covered that song. It was the Osmond Brothers. The Osmond Brothers tried to sound like the Jackson 5 because the Jackson 5 were hot and they wanted to be memorable, right? So they took George Jackson's song, no relation to the Jackson 5, and guess what they did? They brought it to the charts in 1971. And here's another hit by George Jackson. The second part of that is ethylene is a gas that forms when fruits start to decay in the bowl on your counter. And ethylene, once it starts, will make all the fruit in that bowl decay. So one bad apple does indeed spoil the whole bunch, girl. It does. And so here we've got a little bit of misinformation that has spread over 4 decades. Do you get what I'm trying to say? And everybody to this day still thinks it's Aretha Franklin on Rescue Me. And everybody that I've ever talked to always goes, oh, the Jackson 5, when it's One Bad Apple. And I'm like, no, it's not. It couldn't be further from the Jackson Five if you compare them to the Osmonds, other than, you know, both being brothers and both being singers. Everything about those bands is completely different. So what? So at Columbine, Brian, put the neck wrap on, folks, that if you're listening, because we're about to you know, pivot. The Columbine calls that came in had 5 shooters, trench coat mafia, sniper on the roof. Look, there was a guy that had the wrong day to work on the air conditioning in the cafeteria. So yeah, he was up on the roof and he got pegged as a sniper early on. There were people running from the scene that just happened to be wearing their baseball cap backwards, as you know, Klebold and Harris had when they were seen shooting inside the building. And every time somebody saw him, Brian, what do you think that added up to? That added up to an additional shooter, which brings me back to one of our dear friends, who I won't name because he went rogue, that was in an armored vehicle downtown in a place in Iraq, and had a good friend of his shot by a sniper. So every time that he looked up on the rooftops after that with his M2 HB50 cal, he saw those satellite dishes or the water buckets, the water, you know, that are up there, and he would shoot them up thinking they were a sniper. Brian, one little piece of information through the telephone line turns into misinformation, which then turns into disinformation, and that's the route. If it's unintentional, do you see what I mean? If it's unintentional, you never meant it to be that, but you propagate it, you keep it loft, you keep it moving, and the longer it gathers its own, it's like that snowball going downhill.
Right. And that's a great understanding of how these things occur, and then what becomes solidified as information. You know, it goes back to
and now it's a fact.
That's Aretha Franklin did that. And Aretha Franklin, when it came on, you know, her biggest song, RESPECT, talking about respect and sticking it to the man, kind of, you know, I was like, yeah, but Otis Redding wrote that song.
Exactly. And while he was sitting on the dock of the bay.
And he was talking about his girl. And like, you see, but and the irony in that one I always love is like, do you get it? This isn't about men versus women or women versus men. This is human communication. This is how things work. It's how we do. And then it doesn't matter which way the wind blows. It can mean that for you. And that's partly because art and music is subjective, and we get to interpret it, but all information and stories are subjective. You know, you talk about the allegory, the cave, all the time, back to Plato.
Huge
and everyone,
fan.
but everyone uses that. See, you know, if you're just that scared person staying in the cave, you're never going to do anything in life. And that's when it's like, well, hang on.
That's not what it meant.
It's not what it meant. It was like you're looking at the shadow at the back of the cave. You're not seeing what's real. It's about human perception, and then the decisions we make from our perception.
Based on that, those fundamental underpinnings. I'll give you one that just happened with our CEO. So the wonderful Shelley, it's Women's History Month, everybody, to pay the homage to the women in your history. She walked into the kitchen. We were watching a game show before we went to bed. Both were going to have a cocoa or whatever, cocaine, calm us down before we went to sleep. Exactly.
It makes me dream faster.
I know what fentanyl tastes like. And so what happened is she walked in and she just made this aside comment, and she said cinnamon blowhole. And so I go, okay, well, I clearly didn't hear that right. I go, what are you talking about? And she goes, well, the clue they gave was cinnamon blowhole. And I go, Shell, they wouldn't put that on TV. That'd be a great call sign. As a matter of fact, that might be a good chapter in one of our upcoming books, right?
Yeah.
But I said, that's not it. So we went back in and we rewound the tape on the game show, and the person was looking at the other person, trying to use as few words as possible, and said synonym, global. And what they wanted is international was the word they were searching for.
Okay.
But both Shelley and I are clinically deaf.
Yeah.
So it became, now, had we not gone back to the source and corrected it then, cinnamon blowhole would have been a running gag forever.
Yeah, and it sounds like some awful thing that happens at a frat house on some college campus
very
somewhere.
Good thing that happens that you pay for.
So
at a local
that's
no, but
there's countless examples of that, of the story that spins out. And now, and that was all I remember reading the books when I was a kid, and he had the radio show Paul Harvey, and now you know the rest of the story.
Every one of us loved those.
Yeah, because he'd go back and go, oh wow, I didn't know that's how that thing got started. And that's still so prevalent on social media and stuff. You see that where people will do a good thread or something on Twitter like, hey, I know we all know this, but you know where that came from? And it's always so cool. It's like, wow, I had no idea those two things were ever related. Right. And there's a million of these, but it comes from how humans are with information and how we attribute value to certain things over others, and what we want, and a lot of it just kind of either
Yep.
confirms our beliefs, right? That confirmation bias, and we want it to be true, so therefore it is true, and then it goes
Yes.
forward, and then the story gets lost and goes, wow, it doesn't matter anyway. Yeah, the when people use the perception is reality, it's like, no, reality is perception. Your
And reality is
reality,
reality.
yeah.
You know what I'm saying? You
Well,
don't have to go,
but
right?
which is a perception of how you perceive things
You're
to be. Like
exactly right.
it's like when people use, the truth. I want the truth. I go, no, I want the facts. Like, because
Right.
your true. I make fun of the reality shows where they're like, I'm here to speak my truth, and it's like, I hate it, but it's actually
Right.
the greatest way to describe it, because
Yes.
it's such a subjective thing. You're right. Your experience of events is your
You're controlling the
truth.
narrative,
Yeah.
right? But that doesn't mean that what you're saying is true for the fundamental basis, the underpinning of the rest of the argument. But why do we do that? We look, I'll tell you somebody left behind, Ahmaud Arbery. Ahmaud Arbery was left behind because what we did is we went around the country
Yep.
that people died near the same time that Ahmaud did. And what happened is we forgot that Ahmaud Arbery was the perfect poster child for how racism starts and becomes entrenched in a society.
Yeah.
And he was murdered for what, Brian? For jogging.
Jogging.
Okay, so
Yeah.
but we lost sight. So you said that earlier. You said sometimes we lose sight of the original story. I'll give you one. Two cops were killed so far this week. Probably more by the time this is going to reach broadcast. One copper overnight last night shot in a park in Chicago. Two coppers responded to
Yeah.
the home. Two coppers chased the gunman. Gunman spins, turns, and shoots the guy dead.
Yeah.
The copper. Okay. Well, within hours before that, Brian, a copper and his canine partner were killed. They were going through the green light in their community. Everything was fine. Everything's caught on camera. And a kid ran the red light, purportedly texting. I don't know this part of the story, so I'm not going to add conjecture to it. But what we do know is the kid that was driving the car was going 85 and a 35. Hit the copper, broadside, dead right there. DRT,
Wow.
we call that. He and the dog died. The copper. That copper, his name and his commitment to society are going to be lost because what does news media want us to know about? They want us to know about the shooting that followed a high-speed chase, that followed a. Do you understand what I'm saying? So sometimes sensationalism, right? The fact that it sounded enough like the Jackson 5 is enough for us to open a door and go a direction and forget about the
But
pioneers that were really responsible for this the story.
right, and my argument is that's not the media, that's humans.
Yeah, but exactly. So who drives the media? You're right back to
Yeah.
the tail wagging the dog. You see
Yeah.
what I'm trying to say? So they don't just come up with it and go, "Hey, I bet people will love this." They follow an
Yeah, or
algorithm
they go,
that
here,
says we will.
these are the 5 things we're gonna try. Holy crap, this one got all the attention. Let's just do that, not from now
So
on. And
tomorrow we're going to do
that's
two things, right? Right.
it's really that simple.
But that hurts though. That hurts
It
because
does.
what happens
Well,
is you're shaping the history of the foundational elements of a story. That's
and
my thing.
and of course, you get the predicted response from people of, okay, well, we got to teach kids about how to identify misinformation, disinformation. Like, what are you talking about? One,
Exactly.
what does that even mean? What would
Right.
that even look like?
Right.
How are you qualified to come up with something like this? It's so ridiculous. It's all, if you just learn about, this is how you as a human process
Yes.
information. This is how you as a human communicate information. This is called some basic biases about confirmation bias and fundamental attribution error that affect
Exactly.
your reasoning and judgment. And guess what? You can't change that. You can become aware of it. You can put in some sort of measures to an analytical process so you don't fall into that trap. But you are primed to do that. You are 100% primed to fall into that trap every single time, because you care about immediacy and what's going to save me right now, what's going to keep me alive, what's not going to kill me. And if we just understand that process better, you get better at seeing what
Yeah.
misinformation or disinformation is. I saw someone wrote an article about, like, people need to learn how to read. Not that you can't read, like literally read the words on the
Right.
page, but how to read a piece of information, how to
I
read
read
a
that
news
same
article.
story, by the way.
But
just so
it
you
was
know.
great. It was
Right.
great because it was like, all right, hey, this is what you need to do. All right, first, read the title. What does that title say? What does it mean? Who is the author? Right? What are they writing about, and what are they writing for, and who do they work for? Like you put it adds this context, and then look at the words that they choose to use. How did they describe the events? How did that make you feel? And it's like, once you start going down that, it's very simple to tell what's a sensational piece and what's a clinical by the book piece. No one ever reads all those investigations after the fact, and we love those. We always say, hey, wait for that stuff to come out, because all of the facts of the case are in there that the investigators found. I mean, maybe there's something that they didn't find, but everything that's known is right there, not the story.
Whether it benefits the defense or the prosecution.
Yeah, right. It's
we
all there.
have to make sure that it has to be there. And so, look, let's talk about that for a minute. Did Sisyphus spend his life pushing the boulder up the hill only to have it roll back down the hill, or is that yet another allegory? Okay, now I don't want to poke somebody in the eye or talk about faith, but we very recently had a discussion about Samson, and Samson's hair was Samson's strength. Why? Because there's a Jewish group called the Nazir that they didn't drink alcohol, and they grew their hair because they thought that was a sign of
100% devotion
relationship with God. Okay, so obviously cutting Samson's hair was the ultimate insult, right? Because we're saying, your strength from God now is gone. Now what do you do, right? So Brian, sometimes the story is so powerful that we do it a disservice by not looking into what the facts are. And that's exactly how I feel, about reading articles. How many articles do I send you a day?
I don't know, a dozen.
Yeah. Okay. So
that's
at
just
least one
share,
an hour.
So
you're right. At least one an hour that I share with you, where there's a specific point where the person went editorial, and that pisses me off, where they say it could have been, or perhaps this was related. Anytime that you do that, you take away from the information, and you can't create intelligence without information, and that's misinformation. So then if I pass it on knowingly, then it's disinformation, right? I mean, I'm playing fast and loose with the description, only to show people how simple it can be when it starts. There's the old, the old Native American one, Brian. I wrote about it a long time ago. Shelley and I were down around a Native American pueblo, and the person was cooking. They had the bread pan, and they were putting the meatloaf in the bread pan, and they cut the end off of it, and they turned around and they said something to the sky, and they gave it to the dog. And because we didn't speak the Native American language, we didn't know what it was, we asked, and they said, well, great grandmother, the idea is that she blessed the food and she shares it with the dog because the dog is from the earth. And they went on this long explanation. So we sat down, and one of the other family members came in, and we were eating that meat later. And she said, no, that's not true at all. It's because she said, gosh damn it, I wish I would have had a bigger baking pan. I don't want to throw this good meat out. So, but what happened is it became institutional memory.
Yeah.
And if institutional memory is based on a house of cards, Brian, it's going to fail after a while. That's, in essence, that's what I'm trying to bring to the table.
No, and that's a great example of different historical examples you'll see where people will go back now today and go, well, see this part of the story right here, that was hugely important to those. And if you went back in time, they'd be like, oh no, man, like that red was the only clean shirt I had that day, so I wore red. I mean, and that becomes sort of entrenched in these ideas. We take things not for what is the intent and purpose and what were they truly trying to get across. We like these tiny little elements that we think might be significant, and oftentimes they're not often significant to
we
what was
glam
happening.
Onto them.
Right.
We give them weight. I'll give you an example of that. The egg on the wall. Not Wee Willie Winky. What's the egg that falls off? All the king's horses. All the king's men.
Humpty Dumpty.
Humpty Dumpty.
Yeah.
So Humpty Dumpty. You know what you don't see a lot anymore, Brian? Hunchbacks. But let's go to Humpty Dumpty. Humpty Dumpty had nothing to do with an egg. Humpty Dumpty was a cannon that was used during the war, and during the battle with the cannon, the cannon broke, and then they weren't able, and they were overwhelmed, and no manner of sea chanties started somewhere. Do you get what I'm trying to say? And it was a form of communication, just like a martial arts kata. What I had to do is I had to take a series of moves and put them together as a kata, because most of the people that came to my martial arts course couldn't read.
Yeah, and you got to remember it.
So
if I put it in the logical order and memorize it,
And guess what? Now all of a sudden somebody turned it into a song or a rap or a poem, and it's easier to remember. People ask me all the time, well, why can my kid remember every rap lyric?
Yep.
Two things. One, they like it. Okay, so you got to appeal to the person. And the second thing is it appeals to them in an order of clearer thinking and processing something that happened in their own life. Because if they tie it to an emotion or a feeling in their own life, they're apt to remember it. So I will tell you that even that little story that I told about Aretha Franklin and going to the Osmonds, somebody in the crowd is going to hear one of those songs 3 months from now and think of this podcast. That's how it works, Brian.
Well, yeah, and especially when it comes to music, because it's logically and mathematically correct to your brain. It gets it right away. Music is ingrained in all humans.
And it's a frequency.
Well, that's exactly
it. Learn on a frequency,
right? It's a frequency, and it's a repetitive pattern that's right. Consistent. And even with because that gets into a lot of different music, especially like, well, you can get into classical or certain jazz music, but even with hit music, anything becomes a hit. There's a certain amount of predictability to it. With just a little bit of, I'm not sure what's going to happen. Your brain is okay with a little bit, but if it's too much, I don't know what's happening here. There's no real rhythm. It's chaos, and your brain does not like it. Like, what is this racket? This is noise. And so
what did you send to Sean's son? Okay, so Sean Clemens, our consigliere, love him to death. His son Christian's a wonderful pilot and a musician, and he's like 15. So you talk about the samurai, right? And you sent the article to Christian to say, look, there's only so many chords that appear in the hit music, right?
Yeah.
And we see that. And
it's an algorithm.
So, and we're also drawn to what? Discordant. Why? Because discordant becomes the anomaly.
Yep.
And so our brain is naturally triggered to look at anomalous behavior, even in music, even in speech patterns. So we're drawn to that. Why are we drawn to it? First, for survival, and then because it's a little different. And how many times have you had somebody come up with a mohawk that was painted orange, and you ask them, what are you doing? And they go, I want to be different. And you see 10,000 people that day that are in the auditorium with the orange mohawk. I get it. But that's what our brain glams onto, Brian. And so because we're individuals and we no longer function as members of a team, the tribe, what happens is that our individual views become a reality.
Right.
And it's hard to break that. That confirmation bias is very difficult to break, specifically over time.
No, and that's even why comedy works, right? It's when exactly a joke lands because it's something you didn't expect to happen next. It's you have a setup that's leading you down a path, and then all of a sudden the comic goes, nope, it's over here, and you're like, oh my gosh, I didn't see that turn right there. That's hilarious. And but that's how it works. And so part of the reason why I wanted to discuss this on here with everyone is because it's such a prevalent thing, and because we don't understand it, someone has to come up with a new term for it and use it. Then it becomes part of the vernacular. Then everyone's that's misinformation. It's like, look, man, like 90% of the stuff you see is it's talk. It's why I love reading on Twitter a lot people's comments, because it's talk, it's conversation. It's not a definitive statement. It's not hey, I looked into this. They're not teaching you appropriate. Like, we always give the example, when we're in teaching, we're very deliberate, and this is what it is. It's clinical. This is how we explain it. Even though we take people on that emotional roller coaster ride, there's a specific point to everything that we're trying to do, and every single slide and everything comment and everything over here. And so, but the idea is that that's not what most things are. Most things are talk, and talk is cheap, right? That's the whole point. Talk is cheap.
We're bridging a gap here, but let me shine a light on something. Okay, so in class, when we're teaching, it's all science all the time. Absolutely everything draws back to a specific point that needs to be made so you can learn another thing.
Yep.
Okay, now, if we take a look at the podcast is our form of being able to sit down and just have a cup of coffee and talk about things that bother us. So it's opinion-based testimony.
For sure.
We never bring opinion-based testimony into the classroom. There's two completely different things. Arcadia is what goes on in the classroom. Left to Greg is us talking.
Right.
Why is that important?
But why do you do that? Well, because people say, well, that you're not being authentic then, or
no. But wait a minute.
It's actually the opposite.
It's exactly the opposite. We're authentic and transparent, and we're deliberate. And what I mean by that is we're intentional. Yesterday, Brian, we spent over an hour closing the loop on a gosh damn armored car robbery that occurred 2 years ago.
2 or 3 years
in Wheat
ago.
Ridge.
Whatever it was.
Yeah. But why? Because we commented on that information. We're not a flash in the pan. And it was just as relevant today as it was when we went down and broke down that video and talked about it. And now 5 people are in jail, and we know the indictment. Why? Because we, in that professional realm, when I'm rendering my opinion, I want to be right every time. I want to give nothing but fact-based data, right? And then you draw the reasonable conclusion. But on this show, Brian, when we're talking about, hey, I don't like the Chicago painting on the right wall, I think it's on the left wall. It's a completely different thing. You see? So are we still training and educating in the podcast? Yeah, but we're doing it in a fun way where we can argue a point and disagree on something. Why don't we disagree in class? Because we spent 40 years researching everything.
There's no,
and it's based on 3,000 years of stuff, and so there is no wiggle room. And I people that know us know exactly what we're talking about. If you and I are sitting down at a bar, the Aretha Franklin conversation, right? That wonderful place in Mansfield, we were sharing ideas, we were brainstorming things, and we were having a good time. That stuff ain't going to end up in class. You see what I mean? It's a different standard.
Well, and I think. Yes, it's completely different standard, and it's us. This is who we are. We're completely transparent about everything, but you can have nuanced views on things. You can, that's okay. You don't have to toe some line, or you don't have to come out and say some certain thing, and you can ask questions. And especially when we're on here right now discussing, we're being like, there's trust between us right now, not just because we've known each other, work together, but literally, like, in order to have an open, honest discussion, there has to be that trust there. So meaning I have to be able to say something and kind of maybe that isn't correct or makes you uncomfortable, and you have to be able to go, well, Brian, like, I don't know if I agree with that, and here's why. And
so
we have
to be able a level of vulnerability comes from that transparency.
And that's what being transparent and honest is. And so a lot of people can't shift between those things. And I always use, like, the law as an example. Like, there are laws in our country that I completely disagree with. I think they're stupid, and I think we need to change them. But I don't break them. Like, I don't have that right. Like, I follow them. I'm not going to step over and cross that line because it's illegal. Do I agree with it? No, but I have the ability to write my Congress person. I can petition, and I have the right to redress as a U.S. citizen to say, I disagree with these. We should change these.
But you can't do it violently. Totally agree.
Right. Yes. And I can't break. I can't go, well, I don't, disagree with this, so I'm going to do it anyway. It's like, well, okay. But that's a choice you made, and you've now colored outside the lines. Well, I look at that almost, but you get what I'm saying? The difference between what a spokesman is saying about a specific topic versus maybe what their opinion is on what should happen or what that is.
If we discuss it here and we say, hey, this is what science says about it, and this is what I've seen, we're not making stuff up. We're telling you exactly what we've experienced in our life, and we're saying this is the research that we've done. But we're having fun with it. Where in class, class is a lot of fun, but class is literally transmitting data that is going to make you smarter, stronger, faster, and harder to kill in a manner that the pedagogy and the andragogy form a hegemony. And that's not what we do here. This isn't a webinar. We're just discussing things that we like to talk about, and we're tying them together in life hacks that anybody could use in any walk of life. So it doesn't have to be military. It doesn't have to be, police. It can be, first responder, but it can be HR. And it can be you talking to your daughter before she goes to the 7-Eleven, and that's what I like about this format, is because we can really leak some things about ourselves or about our families or about which aren't things that we make a definitive line in the classroom. That, Brian, how often do folks, we research and rehearse every course that we give. We are the top of this game and the point on the pyramid of the research and the thinking in this realm. Yet every single time before we leave, we make sure that we're researching and rehearsing and making sure that the items are relevant that we're going to talk about on that day. How many people can say that they do that? And we know that they don't, right? And so when the person pushes information out immediately after an incident or an event, they're trying to be first. You get where I'm going? They're not trying to be the most accurate. They're trying to scoop the rest of the market, and we don't do that.
That's sort of the next thing I kind of wanted to talk about
Yeah.
on this topic is a lot of folks are just trying to get something out there first. And I think
Yes.
because we sort of have that culture with us where, oh, I heard this and this is what's going on here. Did you? And everyone shares, like, I go through a social media thing and everyone's sharing the same stupid video sometimes. And you're just like,
Yep.
I wish original content was got pushed up in the algorithm, but unfortunately it doesn't. And we'll never
Right.
see that because that
Right.
doesn't, people don't
That's
necessarily like it.
counterintuitive. Right.
Yeah.
Right. Right. Yep.
But and that rush is a big problem. And
Right.
I always say, what are, we get asked different questions sometimes, and sometimes I'm like, okay, here's what I know, and I can comment on this, but I'm not going to answer that other question. Like, well, can't you
Yep.
tell? It's like, nope, the facts of the case aren't out yet. You don't know anything right now. This is pure speculation. You're narrating the TV with the sound off. That's all you're doing at this point. And so those things
Softball.
and that's the thing where people can kind of take a look at is like, is this credible, or is someone just trying to get out there with this information? Are you just sharing this stuff, and why are
So
you doing this? And
so
how does this comment add
you're
value?
so good at that.
What is it you're saying? How does this add value to what's happening?
What do we say all the time? If you can videotape it, if you can film it on your phone, you can stop it.
Stop it.
You can intercede. Okay, so left of bang is more than a concept; it's a way of life, and that's why. Look, I am miserable in the rest of my life. Absolutely everything I do, I'm a failure. But when it comes to this, I'm great at it and I have fun with it. Okay, so I stick in my lane. I'm not going to go throw the first pitch out. You get what I'm trying to say at the local ball game, because I blow at that. I'm not going to be able to do that, and I'm not going to comment on effing films unless it's a film about human behavior, because I'm not an expert at that. So I'll stay in my lane. Now with Brian, I'll talk about that. With Shelley or Sean, I'll talk about that. Those are different instances. So when we take a look at how a person will process the information that you're giving them, we're saying a sound analysis is important. So I see these videos that you're talking about, and only because you and Sean sent them, because I have no other social media. I only have LinkedIn. And all of a sudden I see a guy come on LinkedIn with one of the photos I've seen now 10 times that everybody sends it to me. And it shows a teacher get knocked the F out by a student.
Yeah.
And then it shows like 26 minutes of pablum, of shit that you don't need to know, of response. Okay, look, if you're not left of bang, then you're making all your decisions on the X. And there's always a next bang. So after bang is an important time. Come to a class, we'll talk about it all, ask us questions, write us. So the person goes in and breaks it down. And the breakdown is something like, well, you see here, the person got knocked out. And so what you have to do is okay, like, there you go. Now, we saw that one with the gas station robbery.
Yeah.
The guy distracted him, the people surrounded him. Well, you see right here, he wasn't paying attention and he got robbed.
Dude, you could have seen that down the street. You could have been down the street driving up to the gas station going, oh, that's a robbery in progress. Or those guys are about to look at ambush someone.
And you know what we're more about?
Yeah.
We're more about those guys were sitting in the basement of their mom's home and they were all smoking some kind bud. And one guy looks at the other guy and goes, we can't go to Popeye's fried chicken this afternoon because we're broke. And the other guy goes, hey, I like that Subway whatever sandwich better. And now they're arguing about food. And then one guy goes, well, let's go get some. Well, what are we going to do? Well, we're going to carjack somebody. Yeah. That's where it starts. So if we're talking about that, and then we bring it in and what you should do to be more aware before you even choose the place to go gas, those are beneficial stuff.
Yeah.
Showing somebody shoot themselves, get shot, or the latest one, the St. Louis one of the guy fiddling around with the gun and then shooting, and the guy's narrating the whole thing. He's got a gun.
He shot around already, and then they had some sort of malfunction.
That's what oriented
he's on the phone, and that's what that's why he's filming. So now the guy's standing there on the phone, fumbling around trying to fix the malfunction of his weapon system. Takes him forever to do it, right there in broad daylight, and then just executes the appeared to be homeless person, right in front of him, just right there.
There are hundreds of thousands of those photos right now on the internet, and there's hundreds to thousands that drop every week. And the idea is that if you're going to live your life based on an incident that occurred somewhere else at bang and try to make a reasonable judgment on it, that's ridiculous. All humans are the same all over. All pre-event indications are identical. You just have to pick them out. And if intent is present, danger is present. But if danger is present, opportunity is present. Those simple links will make you so much happier, right? But what we tend to do is we tend to read 2 or 3 articles that day. And what do? Our unconscious biases put them together and show a trend. And now it's trending by the end of the day. Well, hold on for a minute, Brian.
That's another thing. There's so many examples of this. It's like with the whole remember, when the Chinese balloon, was shot down over the U.S. and we were tracking it. And people are freaking the F out. One, wait till you find out what satellites are. Two, wait till you find out all that they're everything that China does in terms of collection. And
Exactly.
three, you, you know anything about what the U.S. does? I'll just leave it at that. But
Exactly.
if you think what China's doing is impressive or scary, wait till you find out what
Yep.
we're doing. But the idea it's such a perfect it's a perfect example of how we think. Oh my gosh, now there's things everywhere. Now we get how would we let this happen? Well,
Yep.
meanwhile, our intelligence services watched them launch that balloon when it
Yep.
first left China, meaning they knew they were going to do it. They knew the time, they knew the location, and were able to observe it, knew where the path was going, determined because of the weather currents that, oh, it got blown off path because they're actually trying to send it down here. And then
Yep.
it went up here and then did something about it. Like it's hilarious. And everyone goes, why are we letting this happen? Just shoot. It's like, okay, if you shoot down an adversary's balloon, they now know that you're
You know
you have
all of the
yeah.
information that led up to that trajectory of those
Or you
rounds.
could let
Exactly.
them keep thinking that what they're doing
Or I
is
like the best a selfie with the pilot. That's
yeah,
okay.
of course. That's
Instead of
awesome.
firing that guy and putting him in jail,
Yeah.
okay, what happens is that's the most important thing that came out of that
His
entire
and
thing.
his
But
whole
did it show a
squadron is
trend? Oh my God.
so jealous of him. But yeah, but then we
Oh
think,
yeah.
well, what else is out there?
Yep.
How long? Oh my God, they're everywhere and they're doing all this stuff to us. It's like they always have been. Like you're just fine. The
And they
funny thing
have to.
well, the
We
funny
do
thing
the
about
same.
this is
Everybody.
when
Yep.
everyone tries to be out first with what's going on and they're everything's a pattern and look at the, it's like a lot of times what you're doing is you're just showing your ignorance of the situation because you're
Right.
showing that you didn't know any of this shit was going on already. So I
Right.
love it when people do that because I always love it when people, show their ignorance or show who they
Of
really
course.
are or how little they know because it helps go, see, we probably shouldn't listen to this person anymore, but everyone
So
still does.
so let's add this to that. When you read who the author is, you have incumbent upon you the uh, onus of looking that person up,
Yeah.
looking at other things that they wrote, and looking what they contributed to. Would you agree with me that there are doctors out there that are absolutely insane
Yeah.
or
Yes.
bring their ridiculous? What about a soldier? What about
Yeah.
a Marine?
Yeah.
What about a politician? What about look? There's
Yeah.
people in our walks of life that talk just to be heard,
Yep.
and they write just to be read,
Yep.
and that's all they're about. I mean, look, Jay Leno can't stay off of television. You
Oh
see
my
what I'm
God.
saying?
That's a great
So,
example.
and so was the guy. What was the guy that ended up selling fish oil? He had the great thing in the morning, Larry King.
I can't remember.
Okay, so
Oh
Larry
yeah.
King went through every day and who he is, and he's at the top of the game to finally hawking fish oil at 2 a.m. with a guy because he couldn't get away from it. That was him. He
Yeah.
needed to be in front of that camera and that microphone, right? So I'll go to cryptids, and I know everybody loves when I go to UFOs or Bigfoot or Big Feet, I guess it would be. And there's that video that keeps coming out of the ball that goes by, and there's different names. It's the bee, it's this, and it's going so far, and it's over the water, and it's in, and people are chiming in, and the guy's saying, "Well, I was on the USS Nimitz, and
Oh
I
yeah.
was the
Yeah.
communications expert, and I came in. First of all, what's the first rule? Shut the fuck up. Second rule is if you're going to come out there, if you're not credentialed or don't have credibility, or you're not an eyeball witness, and remember what we say about witnesses. So, Brian, I've seen that video broken down by experts
Yeah.
on one side, probably 10 or 11 times on the cryptid side, and probably 200 times on the science side. And everybody goes, look, this object is only going this speed. What the problem is
Yeah.
our parallax and the
Parallax.
perspective of
Yeah.
this.
Yeah.
And okay, and they mathematically show it, and they
And
say
they'll
so it's
recreate it with their
insignificant.
iPhone.
It's
That's the best.
insignificant.
Yeah.
So what happens is I don't want to be bamboozled and be caught up in something like that.
Mhm.
So I'll withhold my opinion until I hear more than one opinion.
Right.
And I will
Right.
never, when people ask us to render a legal opinion, if they say, my opinion is this, well, first of all, you've tainted me. Second of all, I'll need both sides. I'll need all arguments. I'll need every video that's available. Then I'll render my opinion. Because if you're not involved in the caper, your gut, brain, instinct, history, what you ate for breakfast comes in and it taints the pool. And so are we saying that all things that are out there are lies? No.
No.
But enjoy the entertainment value.
Yeah.
Don't turn around and start digging in your yard because we're going to war with China, right? I mean, and people do, Brian. People do that stuff.
Well, and that stuff has because it's those full of shit stories. I have started wars before, even
Of course they
because
have.
people have made decisions off of bad information, or they were
Yes.
done intentionally to draw something. I mean, that's the problem when you sensationalize everything. It makes it harder to determine what you need to act on and what you should just go, okay.
So,
And so you have
you're
to have that
so
healthy dose of
yes,
skepticism and
yes,
take a look at, because social media is a great thing, Greg, too. I know you only have LinkedIn, but just look at who you're following. Just look at every
yeah.
account, and you're going to start to see like, oh, wait a minute, I'm pretty much
There's a pattern.
following. There's a pattern here of
There
where
sure
I'm
is.
getting information, and wow, it turns out when something comes
Yep.
out, they all agree on something. So maybe that's feeding into the fact that, which is why
Of
we
course
both
it
do it,
is.
where I'll follow or be connected with something that has absolutely nothing to do with what
Yep.
I do or who I am,
Cigar
or know anything about. But
aficionado.
you always do the
Exactly.
one when you travel. We love
Yep.
that is go in. You travel. But go into the Hudson News at the airport and buy a
Yep.
magazine of some crap that you've never been interested before, know nothing about, and then you go, oh
Precisely.
wow, like I'm.
But you have to do what? You have to read it cover to
Gotta read
cover,
it, yeah.
including the advertisements and the
Yep.
commentary, because only then will you see that viewpoint. And the more you do that, look, I follow some harebrained shit, but
Yeah.
I understand it's completely entertainment. But
Yeah.
then what do? We send it to Martin and Sean and Shelley, and we say, what are your views on this? And if we have to go outside of that, we have what's called an advisory board, and we send it to them before we would ever render a comment on something. Do you get what I'm trying to say? We would have to make sure that it passes muster, but we don't do that on a joke, do we? You see what I
Yeah.
mean? We don't do that on a song we like.
Well,
so it's a different standard.
And the song thing is a lot like sort of meme culture and people sending
Yes.
stuff. It's like everyone memes are supposed to be funny or highlight a point. It's a great way to transmit a lot of information over just an image with some text on it. But it's not the real thing. It's the joke. It's not the
Yes.
actual thing. It's a commentary on it. And the
and
big
it's
thing,
less than parody. It's a form of social commentary that doesn't have to be funny. And that's the great thing about it. What do you see in this picture? It's like the dot thing where you pull it away and do you see the sailboat? I like that. Sometimes you send me stuff and I don't understand it. So I have to write you and I go, I don't get the joke.
Yeah.
And then you have to fill me in on those things that I don't understand about social media.
Yeah, here's the 3 things surrounding that you need to know in order to get that meme, right?
Yes, but I love when you do that, because that opens my eyes to a thing that or my heart or my ears to a thing that I don't know, and I'm not afraid of that. But some people are. Brian, fear is a motivator. So if you sell with fear, you're wrong. Sex is a motivator. So if you sell with sex, you're wrong, right? Because what does that do? That changes my electrochemical neurotransmitters in a direction, and that's deliberate and intentional too. So that's right back to your misinformation, disinformation. Am I using the left hand to jab so I can hit you with the right hand hook or cross, right? I mean, that's what it is. And if you're doing that for nefarious means, then it's evil, right? And that's simple.
Well, because another one I see where people will just make all these wild harebrained, schemes up in their head, whatever you want to call it, a conspiracy theory or just commentary on something, and they create these big elaborate things, and they're constantly putting stuff out. And this person's clearly clickbait. It's clearly bullshit. They're trying to get you to buy something, or they're making money off of this, and it's very but people still fall into it. And then what do? They come back like, yeah, but he was right about this thing. It's like, okay, so we're going to use the broken clock fucking methodology
You're
here
exactly
to
right.
evaluate
Twice a
them.
day.
Like, way to go with that. Like, I'm gonna make predictions on 700 things. Look, I was right on this one. Well, maybe some of the other things I'm saying could be right. No, that's not what it means. It means you are right on one.
That's the quatrains of Nostradamus theory, Brian.
Oh, of course.
Don't try to make Nostradamus work, right?
Oh my God.
Because what they go, well, Hitler was Hitler, and in the language. Oh my Lord. And you know what? People buy into that. You know why people buy into that? Because people are vulnerable, and people are afraid, and people are insecure.
And
right?
We don't like complexity. We don't like we don't understand randomness. We don't
like change.
We don't like change for
even weather change. Why is weather such a significant thing? Because weather can still kill us, Brian. That's important.
And it comes down to lack of control. I mean, and it's part of why religion is so powerful. It is because I need to have a faith system. I need to have a belief to know that there's order here. Like there has to be a reason. There has to be
you're on there.
There has to be a person behind this There has to be a reason for
Yep.
everything, and these things must be connected. And you're like, nah, it's probably just a bunch of people all trying to get whatever they're trying to get. And then sometimes,
Yeah.
sometimes those needs line up where they'll work together, and sometimes they're bitter enemies on that. And so,
Exactly.
but that we don't like we don't like uncertainty. We don't like just
Nope.
thinking of us hurtling through space, you know what I mean? That could be just bashed in with a solar flare or a meteor at any second. That's
At any
terrifying.
time. And
And
you know, the number one killer of people's heart disease, you could drop dead from a
yeah,
heart attack anytime and be completely healthy. Those things scare us. So guess what happens? We don't identify that, but we identify the realm of that. And you and I were talking to a very good friend in Texas, and they were talking about cutting because, you know, we were talking about cutting is a sign.
yeah,
Why do people cut? Because
control.
it's a
Yeah,
form of control.
yeah,
They can control how deep and how long and how many cuts. And
yeah,
it's one of the things in their life they can control. So what do you got to give them? You got to give them other things that they can control and wean them off one bad habit to go another. That's why some people say, hey, 12-step works, and other people go, oh, it's just a formula. Yeah, it's a formula. It's a formula to take an off ramp, to
yeah,
find the blinker on your car so you can slow down, merge, and lead, right? Now, other people don't need that, but there's a million or a billion people out there that do need that. So understanding control and what's within and what's without of it. And Brian, I would end with this on my thought. People are lazy. So
oh
people
yeah,
want to read the headline. They don't necessarily want to read the article.
yeah,
And that's why the article goes through a myriad other opportunities. Well, just like what happened in Philadelphia last week, we have a problem in Florida. And the thing in Florida just shows a weakness in the Republican. That's all the preamble before we
yeah,
ever get to the facts of the story. Why? Because they're taking you everywhere that they know that that emotional toll will set its hook deepest, you know? And so
yeah,
don't, if you do it for entertainment, it's fine. It's like masturbation. You know what I'm saying? Some people will masturbate. Everybody masturbates. I think we can talk about that. I'm probably doing it 2-3 times during one of our calls. But the idea is that what you masturbate to is something. If you're doing it for, you know, view of nature, or if you're doing it, but there's some people that do it the wrong way and they do it with the intent to hurt somebody else or with harmful material. The idea is that as long as you understand to separate the entertainment from the act, then you've got it made. So don't base everything that you're going to do today on the headlines. Go out and take a look outside. You get what I'm saying?
yeah.
Interact with the humans in your tribe, right? That'll give you more to
They
masturbate about, I guess.
it's gonna say,
At the end of the day, it will.
no,
Come on.
it's gonna. So there's just so many jokes I could have put in there that I just stayed
Exactly.
so
Thank you
far
for
away
not.
from. But that gets back to, like, we get that information. We like movies. Why do we like movies? Our brain
Yep.
loves movies, and but that's not how it actually works.
Right.
And so it kind of tricks us. It fools us. It gives us file folders, for things that don't actually exist. It's like the well, I was rewatching an episode of that show, Breaking Bad. I love
Mm,
that show because it's not, it's obviously, this is not how that drug business works. That's not how meth, I mean, it's so far from it.
right.
But the guy, I forget the actor's name, who plays the kid Jesse, who's this punk kid that like, he's so good because I'm watching it and I want to punch this kid and shake him and be like, "What? It's just shut up, stop!" And
Oh my
so he's
gosh,
such
that's
a good
amazing.
act. So I'm not into the storyline as, "Oh my God, yes," and they can have the fried chicken place that's the front for the methamphetamine. It's like, no, it's that character is so good that it's got my brain hooked in, and
That's
like,
great.
and so it's so engaging to me. Like, I
Right.
know it's fantasy,
Which
but
releases what? Releases
oh yeah,
oxytocin and endorphins. And so
yeah,
when you see that actor in other things, you're going to be drawn to that. And people wonder, why do I see the same 6 people in films all the
because
time?
if you
It's
find that,
because
yeah,
there's an algorithm, and the
yeah,
algorithm says, hey, you know, Michael Caine has been in everything. Michael Caine appeared in the Bible and it's been in
yeah,
everything relevant all the way till, you know, the last Avatar. Michael Caine,
yeah.
mate. And why?
David
Because
Attenborough. Yeah,
you got
it's a
it.
perfect. He's
So
going to narrate that.
and we can't get away from that, okay? But that's okay. But you don't live the rest of your life on that. And you didn't call 911 because you saw a character like that in real life and said, hey, I think you should start following this guy around
Right.
based on this movie I saw, right?
Yeah,
So that's funny.
it all feeds into it, and that's kind of the big points. I definitely, we hit a lot of the points I wanted to talk about. I love
Okay.
how we brought in the allegory of the cave, and someone who's trying to sell something with fear or sex,
Yeah.
someone who's trying to get information out there first, and how we go from you took the song "Rescue Me." I can't remember how you got from Rescue Me to Ethylene, but you got to Ethylene to Bob Seger to George
Yeah,
Jackson to One Bad Apple to
that's where the
the
ethylene comes
Jackson
in.
Five, which is really the Osmond brothers, to
Exactly.
Columbine to Afghanistan to what that is, and it's how we tie things together with a narrative.
Yes.
But it can be based on, if I'm basing something on bad information, it's eventually going to collapse. Like it can go on for a
Yep.
while, right? But it's a house of cards. Well, eventually you build it up enough, then that the house of cards is going to collapse.
Hendrix, excuse me
Wow.
while I kiss this guy. Yeah. Okay.
Yes, I
So
I I
I
heard
got that one
kiss.
from my dad.
I heard kiss
Dad,
the
left-handed
sky.
black guy.
So
He's gay. And my dad.
yeah, oh
Okay.
God.
And it's like two-fisted. Holy crap. Where's this going, Dad? And he goes, it's right in the lyrics, son. Excuse me while I kiss this
Yeah,
guy.
he
And
one of my
that can be a meme. That could be a joke.
one of my
But Brian,
favorites of all time. Yeah.
your points are well taken, because it's okay if it's entertainment based. It's okay when it's just a coffee around the campfire discussion. But when it comes to ruling your life or making a big decision, don't go there. Don't fall for that.
Well, I really do wish people were slightly more skeptical about things before they started sharing it with everyone they know. And I love the fake walk back later. Like no one ever does the hey, well, every once in a while I see someone who's like, hey, I shared this. Totally sorry. That was BS. I looked into it. I got called
Our
out. Thank
favorite.
and thank you for calling me. But what do
Yep.
people do? Hey, look, I know this didn't quite seem, but, and then they try to justify all their actions. You're like, you didn't learn.
Knowing what
Didn't
we
learn.
know now,
Yeah.
isn't that our favorite line?
Okay.
Knowing what we
Things
know now.
escalated quickly there. Oh,
Exactly. They killed the guy.
yeah.
No, there's another reason. Why do we remember those things? We remember them because they're earwigs, because they follow a pattern,
Yeah.
and it's something that's not going to happen in my life.
Right.
So I can glam onto it. It's because it's so exotic, Brian. It's so different that it's fun. But we call those exotic different things anomalies, right? And that incongruent signal, that discordant music, is what makes us turn and look. When that glass breaks, we turn and look because it's so discordant with the rest of our day.
Yeah.
That's great.
Yeah. Well, I think that's probably a good place to sort of end on. I mean, I know we do have stuff on our, for those of you listening, we still this far into the podcast. That's good. We should just say,
thank you.
I'll just start random stuff now. But no, we got more on the Patreon side.
Yeah, we do.
Hit us up at leftofgreg@gmail.com. Follow us if you want to go to the Arcadia Cognerati site and sign up just to subscribe to stay in touch. I don't send out a lot of emails. When I do, it's about training we have coming up, or the stuff we have coming up with our textbook and the follow-on web-based stuff that we're going to have for that. That's all happening this year quickly. And we have like kind of an initial print run coming with the textbook that's going to be sort of discounted before everything gets going. So we're going to have like a pre-order sale coming up. So you want to get on that if you're interested. If not, just keep listening. And the other big thing I ask of folks, if you do like the podcast, obviously leftofgreg@gmail.com, reach out if you have something specific you want us to talk about or a question. We do a lot more of that on the Patreon side for those folks, but sometimes I get good feedback and we want to do an entire episode. But also just sharing it with your friends. If you enjoyed it, send it to a friend, say, hey, check this episode out. That helps us kind of grow it a little bit more, which helps us better quality audio, better stuff, more things we can do in the future. And it kind of helps get the message out there. So if you can share it with your friends. And Greg, I don't know, any final words from you?
Yeah. If you're going to binge on something, might as well be us. It's not going to gain any weight. It's not going to overdose. And what else? I don't know. That's enough.
You're not going to overdose on Left of Greg.
You can't. You can't. You can't.
Your latest.
You may masturbate feverishly, but
the latest. It's gonna be at least the last 3 or 4 episodes where Greg's been working in. I know what fentanyl tastes like. I don't know. That's been your comment.
Exactly.
You know what?
That all started out of St. Louis and the wonderful people on the ground there. And Brian, that's a good shout out. Wonderful people at ERCA, the state of Pennsylvania, the city of Mansfield, Mansfield State University, New York. Brian and I spent some time over there the last couple of weeks, and thank you everybody. You treated us
we got treated very well.
We really did.
We did.
We really did. So thanks to those folks.
Hopefully we're welcome back, but we'll see.
After this episode, I don't know.
All right. Well, thanks everyone for tuning in, and don't forget that training changes behavior.